So screen time exposure can cause addiction. It can cause agitation, memory loss, distractedness, like say you're driving and you can't turn away from a text message. That's a problem. If you're driving with the phone because you can't get away from the phone, that's a screen time addiction. When you get a text message, say it's your first text message, the brain says, "Ooh, I like that. I want more of that." And then it goes for more. And bingo, you're on the road to getting addicted. What's interesting is that the frequencies that these devices use to operate activate this response. It's called the dopamine effect. Mm-hmm. And we've heard of that in terms of drugs, including heroin. But we now have scientists who are saying that the frequencies that they're reporting, that the frequencies that are required in order to operate a mobile device, these very same frequencies activate the dopamine effect.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey, Holistic Hilda here. This is episode 224, and our guest today is Katie Singer. Katie is the author of An Electronic Silent Spring. This is a book about the health and environmental effects of exposure to electromagnetic radiation. Today, we focus on both the physical impact of our devices and the psychological impact as well. We spend time discussing how to help our children break their screen addiction. But let's face it, it's not just the kids who are addicted, we are too. These devices are designed to activate our brain's pleasure center. No wonder they are so hard to set aside. Today with Katie, we cover a lot of ground about our electronic devices, how to use them judiciously, the problem with radiation, and my favorite part, practical steps to limit their pull on us and our children. Before we get into it, a quick shout out to our sponsors. First, a reminder that we have a ton of resources here at the Foundation to help you live your healthiest life. Our 2020 shopping guide just came out, and it has over 100 pages of our most recommended sources for beverages, bread, butter, ghee, cheese, cod liver oil, pretty much the whole gamut. I can hardly believe it's only $3, to be honest with you. So go to our website and pick one up today, buy a bunch, or become a member and support our work and get it for free. That's westonaprice.org. And this episode is brought to you in part by Grass-Fed Liver and Bone Marrow by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats, liver, and bone marrow in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Beef liver and bone marrow are the most effective foods to support health and wellness. These traditional foods were, and still are, fundamental to our biology. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to kick things off with a little story about my daughter who was out with some friends recently. They were celebrating someone's birthday at a restaurant, and she said, "Mom, I looked around and everyone in our party was staring at their phones, or they were posting something, or they were looking at something, and they would smile briefly when taking a picture of themselves, but then they would go back to their phones." And one of her friends even went so far as to say to my daughter, "Amelia, are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine," but they thought it was odd that she wasn't on her phone. What's happening here? Why is this the sudden norm, Katie?
That's the question. Yeah. Well, and how do we live with it? We've all got so many questions about this stuff, and there aren't a lot of answers, but we can definitely say that society has changed in a blink.
Yeah, absolutely. And these phones and devices seem to have an addictive quality to them. I was at the beach with a friend the other day, and he was at the beach on his iPad. And I wanted to say, do you see this whole ocean in front of you, all this beauty, not to mention the people around you? And yet he was mesmerized by that iPad.
Let me share a context that I've been thinking of. I assume that people who are tuned in are concerned about their health, and they know that food matters to our health. Well, for thousands of years, we've had regulations around food. So there are religious practices, for example, that say if you're going to have meat, you want to butcher the animal in a way that doesn't cause pain to the animal. There are diets that say you separate eating fruit from everything else because the enzymes you need to digest fruit are different from the enzymes you need for other food, and they don't mix well because fruit goes through you faster. If you're going to eat grains or beans, you want to soak them overnight before you cook them. We have so many guidelines for helping us eat in a healthy way. And
Yes.
Every family is going to choose what works for them, and it's going to change and evolve over time. We also know, like in terms of pesticides, I have friends who have fruit orchards, and if they don't spray their orchard with pesticides, they will be fined heavily in their town because of an ordinance, because if they don't spray, then they endanger other fruit growers' fruit that they could get infested.
Oh.
And so there's a regulation, I'm going to say, where the motive is for commercial purposes, and it interferes with whoever's living nearby with their exposure to pesticides, and also with the fruit that anybody is going to grow who doesn't want to be spraying their fruit with pesticides. But there again, we've got regulations around food. Now, let's go to electronics. Really, let's say that we've had wireless devices for about 20 years. They've been ubiquitous for about 20 years. We've had electronic devices, let's say, for 120 years.
Mm-hmm.
And electricity showed up in cities at the turn of the century, little before the turn of the century. We have almost no regulation. And when it comes to mobile devices, I can tell you what the regulations are. It's pretty strong.
What are the regulations relating to our devices?
I'm going to break that. The way you've said it is very interesting, and I'm going to break it into two parts. So there are regulations, like what are the regulations around mobile devices? But then in order for a mobile device to operate, it needs infrastructure. It needs cell towers, antennas. And so we want to know what are the regulations around, they're called access networks. So let me go with the first question. In order to determine that mobile devices are safe enough to be marketed, this is how the FCC did it. They took a 220-pound plastic model man. It's called a standard anthropomorphic model, SAM. And they filled his head with salty fluid. Then they took his temperature. Then they gave him a cell phone for 6 minutes. This was in the mid-90s. And then they took his temperature after those 6 minutes. Because his temperature had not changed by 2 degrees Celsius, that's almost 4 degrees Fahrenheit, in those 6 minutes, your teenager can have a mobile device. So in other words, they were only looking at immediate thermal effects, thermal being temperature. Now, there are uncountable numbers of non-thermal effects, and addiction would be one of them. You see how addiction is not a thermal effect.
Right.
But it's an effect of using the device. We know that. So I'm just going to put that on the table. That's a regulation for determining.
Well, it was a test that they did to determine if there was any maybe negative impact or any impact at all.
No, what they're determining is there an immediate temperature change?
Right, but that's all. That's what I'm saying. That's all they were measuring.
Right.
Wow.
They're not measuring for anything else. And so they're not measuring for non-thermal effects. They're not measuring for biological effects. They're not measuring for anything except immediate temperature effects. Now, let's look at the infrastructure. In order for a mobile device to operate, it needs an antenna. It actually needs an international array of antennas. In 1996, which was around the same time that the test was given for mobile devices, with the immediate thermal effects. In 1996, Congress passed a law, the Telecommunications Act, and it states in Section 704 that no health or environmental effect may be considered when a telecom corporation requests that a city give them a permit to install an antenna or a cell tower.
I've heard that because we interviewed Theodora Scorado about 5G, and she said that very thing, that when people are making a case in a community trying to fight against having these very frequent cell towers with stronger radiation, they can't mention health as a reason for which they don't want it installed. And that's because of that act you just mentioned.
And to clarify, it's that your city councilors cannot prohibit a cell tower based on health or environmental concerns.
That's a little bit alarming.
It's very alarming. And we're now 23 years downwind of that federal law. There are many other laws that reinforce it, I would say.
Okay, so we've talked about regulations, but I want to talk a little bit more on a personal level, Katie. So help me understand, what can we do to use our devices in a more healthy way?
That's the question. And at some level, at a very, obvious level, we are all on our own with this question. What is within our control, given what's happening in terms of ubiquitous deployment of infrastructure, which just continues, and then in terms of devices? One of the things that concerns me is that if you have a child and you send your kid to school, they're going to be getting a Chromebook, an iPad issued by the school system starting in kindergarten. If you want a job now, you can't really get a job without a smartphone. There's so much that it's not within our control anymore. So for me, it's important to name those things that we don't have control over before we get to that question of, well, what is within my control? Because that is getting more and more limited.
And there may be people right now who are listening thinking, so what if my kid gets a Chromebook? Actually, that's good. I want them to be technologically savvy. And so what if I can't get a job without a smartphone? I do have a smartphone. So we haven't in this conversation made a case for why these devices aren't healthy in the first place, or why we should be concerned about a cell tower near our home or school. Can you get into that a little bit, Katie?
So there are so many concerns that I live with. One of them is screen time exposure. That's kind of what you were talking about with your teenager being surrounded by her friends and they're all tethered to their phone. That's a screen time addiction. They can't get away from it. And screen time exposure is different from exposure to electromagnetic radiation. So all of these devices emit radiation. All of the antennas emit radiation. And the radiation causes lots of biological harm. And my understanding is we're not going to focus on that in this conversation. We're going to focus on screen time.
Oh, you're so right. Let's focus on screen time. Help us understand the addictive power of screen time and what that screen time exposure does to us.
So here, I'd like to start by defining what is addiction. So screen time exposure can cause addiction. It can cause agitation, memory loss, distractedness, like say you're driving and you can't turn away from a text message. That's a problem. If you're driving with the phone because you can't get away from the phone, that's a screen time addiction. When you get a text message, say it's your first text message, the brain says, "Ooh, I like that. I want more of that." And then it goes for more. And bingo, you're on the road to getting addicted. What's interesting is that the frequencies that these devices use to operate activate this response. It's called the dopamine effect. Mm-hmm. And we've heard of that in terms of drugs, including heroin. But we now have scientists who are saying that the frequencies that they're reporting, that the frequencies that are required in order to operate a mobile device, these very same frequencies activate the dopamine effect.
Coming up, Katie offers a number of specific ideas that you can implement immediately for breaking screen addiction.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
I am going to Ecuador on an ancestral health tour this April, the 1st to the 8th. Who's with me? This trip isn't for everybody, you guys. I have to be honest. How do you know if it's for you? The trip is for you if you want to get out of your comfort zone and encounter a new culture and have new experiences. It's for you if you want to travel and give back at the same time. We are making sure that our trip supports the local economy and the lifestyle of ancestral communities. And it's for you if you want to sit around a table with me, enjoying nourishing traditional foods in one of South America's most biodiverse and beautiful ecosystems. Of course, we'll be sharing unique moments together like that, as well as catching the morning sunrise and grounding. So if you think it's for you, and I certainly hope you do, sign up today. Go to my website, holistichilda.com, for details. And act quickly so you can take advantage of early bird pricing, which brings the cost to just under $2,600. I'm telling you, it's going to be the trip of a lifetime. And this episode is brought to you in part by grass-fed liver and bone marrow by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats, liver, and bone marrow in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Beef liver and bone marrow are the most effective foods to support health and wellness. These traditional foods were and still are fundamental to our biology. It's incredibly insightful to see how animals in the wild instinctively go for the liver and the bone marrow first, leaving the muscle meats for the birds. Even then, the birds will be caught taking marrow bones high into the sky and dropping them onto the rocks in order to gain access to the inside. Liver and bone marrow provide concentrated amounts of vitamin A, choline, folate, B12, copper, heme, iron, and fat-soluble activators that are now absent from the modern diet. This nourishment is known to support methylation and fundamental health. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. I've talked to friends who say, yeah, I'll be on my device just checking something for a minute, and then they find they can't stop. So how can we break that addictive cycle for ourselves or our children?
Yeah, that's the question. I think the first step is to identify that you've got a problem. And that would be the same with any addiction.
Yeah, that's what the 12-step people say, right?
Yeah, there's a woman named Chris, C-R-I-S, Chris Rowan, and she does workshops in schools. And she came up with a questionnaire, and we'll post this for listeners, but she's got 7 questions. And she says, if you check 3 of them, you've likely got an addiction. So if you say, I can't imagine going anywhere without my mobile device, that would be 1. 2 would be, it's not as much fun as it used to be online. 3, I'm at the screen for longer than I intended to be in front of the screen. I've tried to decrease my screen time, but I can't. The screen time is taking up almost all of my time. I'm online when I actually prefer to hang out with real people or to do my homework or work on some other project. Or if you start thinking that you're online more than it's good for you. So those are 7 instances. And she says, if you check 3 of them, you're likely addicted. So that's the first step.
And what would be the next step?
Basically, I'm a reporter. I collect ideas from around the world. But here's one that's really interesting. It started in November of 2018 in Shandong province in China. More than 40% of their young people now have myopia, nearsightedness. And so they implemented a regulation in the schools, no cell phones allowed in schools. And children are only allowed to have 15-minute long sessions of screen time, no more than 15 minutes per session, and no more than a total of 1 hour per day. That's for this very large province in China. So I think that's very worthwhile. A friend who has a 15-year-old daughter, her daughter has been educated in Waldorf schools. And I know this child, and she's wonderful, and she cannot regulate herself. She can't stop herself most of the time from being online. So the family they've started getting use of their egg timer. They set it for 15 minutes, and she knows that's what her limit is. And it's a tool that she's going to be able to use, even when her parents don't implement it. That if she puts on the timer, okay, that's a tool she can use. Also, she does not have her own computer. And in order for her to access one of their computers, they have to enter the password. So she can't just get online herself. Now, that's a problem if you're going to a public school, because the school is going to be issuing every child a computer, and they're going to have the passwords. That means you've got to get the school on board with you to make some limits.
And have you heard of studies that indicate that we're rewiring our brains with so much screen time? Is that one of the problems with our children, and that we're limiting their eye contact with other people and limiting engagement on some levels?
So there are people who are writing about this. Victoria Dunkley is an MD child psychiatrist, and she has a wonderful book called Reset Your Child's Brain, a 4-week plan to end meltdowns, raise grades, boost social skills by reversing the effects of electronic screen time. And she has a lot of studies showing exactly what you've just said, that our brains are impacted by all of this screen time exposure. I can share what her remedy is, which I think is fabulous. She, as a child psychiatrist, was just seeing children come into her office with problems, frankly, she was not trained to expect. And she realized that she could not give a proper diagnosis until and unless the child went on a 3-week electronic fast. So no electronics for at least 3 weeks. And then they would come back, and in some cases, the problems had entirely cleared up. She was seeing children with psychosis, with what seemed like autistic behavior, combinations of psychosis and autistic behavior. She couldn't give a diagnosis until and unless they went on this fast. And then in her program, she also has a week where you adjust, so you reintroduce electronics, starting with 15 minutes a day, and then you increase to 20 minutes a day. You get to, say, if you get to 45 minutes a day and the kid is fine, and then you get to 50 minutes a day and you have a meltdown, you know that the limit is 45 minutes a day.
Oh, absolutely. So we need to be very aware of these things. And again, I feel like earlier I was, throwing my daughter's friends under the bus and the guy on the beach on the bus, when the truth is all of us are under the sway of these devices unless, we have the maturity to recognize we have a problem and to make some changes, because I'm afraid it's affecting all of us, isn't it?
Everyone is affected. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's like if someone is addicted to alcohol, it may not be about maturity for them to admit that they've got a problem, because they're so impacted by the drug. And in this case, the drug is the device, that they can't think clearly enough to make a mature observation.
So let's talk directly to parents for a second, Katie. What can parents do to help change their child's relationship with these electronic devices?
One of my favorite recommendations comes from a pediatrician in the Bay Area. Her name is Toril Gelter, Dr. Toril Gelter. She's an MD pediatrician. And she was noticing that a lot of the children in her practice were coming in with autistic behavior and ADHD and all the stuff that we now see commonly. She came up with a protocol. It reduces exposure to radiation. So this is different from dealing directly with the screen time, but it dovetails beautifully. And I actually have written about this for Wise Traditions. The paper is called Calming Behavior in Children with Autism and ADHD. And here's the whole recipe. You turn the Wi-Fi off at night for at least 12 hours. You don't let the child within 8 feet of a cordless phone or any kind of mobile device. And then while sleeping, you unplug everything in the bedroom. Don't just turn it off, unplug it. And she's got case studies of really wonderful things that have happened. She had one child in her care, a 10-year-old boy, and he had never spoken a word. And he was really aggressive, agitated all the time. He screamed nonstop every night from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. every night. This family lived on a military base, and the pediatrician thought because of their exposure from the radiation from the military base, she thought there's no way that this is going to work, that if they reduce their exposure within their house, it's not going to help. Well, all they did was turn off their Wi-Fi at night. And 3 days later, this boy spoke a complete sentence for the first time.
That is powerful.
Yeah. And the doctor put him on a therapeutic grade fish oil. And within 3 weeks, he was sleeping through the night, no more screaming. Now, we don't say that this experiment caused the change in his behavior or his sleeping. What we do say is that this experiment is free and anyone can try it. But I did that paper, I think, in 2015. And unfortunately now I get calls from families where they need to have internet access if they want a phone or they want internet access, which they need for their work or for their school. But in their area, the only way to get internet access is wirelessly. And if they want it turned back on, they have to call the service provider who has to come out and turn it back on. And eventually they get charged for this. So we are moving in a direction of having all of our infrastructure be by wireless devices. So I'm going to throw this back to listeners and say, please come up with solutions for this problem. So we need to know, how can you turn off your Wi-Fi router if it's a wireless router? How can you turn that off without having to call a service provider?
Oh, well, the advice you've given is actually great for families, even if they don't have kids. Any single people listening right now, they can take some of these steps. And if it is getting complicated because you can't just turn your Wi-Fi off without calling the service people in and all this, then we are going to need to get creative about how to approach this and lower or mitigate some of our exposure.
Right. And I think you might want to look for a router that you can turn off and on. Dr. Gelter, the pediatrician who came up with this protocol, she also encourages people to make a list before they do this experiment. She said, you've got to try the experiment for 2 weeks to test it. And before, give yourself a list. So maybe you've got agitated sleep or headaches, or your digestion is off, or your attention span is not great. You make a list of problems that you have or that your child has. Then rank them from 1 to 10, with 1 being the least bothersome and 10 being the worst imaginable. Then you do your experiment for 2 weeks. Then 2 weeks later, go back to your checklist and rank it again, and you'll see. And so if you don't see a difference in those 2 weeks, the problem may not be about your exposure to radiation. It's worthwhile to do the checklist so you have something to measure.
Absolutely. And as we said, these two things are intertwined, right? Our concerns about the radiation exposure and our addictions to the device, they go hand in hand. And either way, I think if you reduce your radiation exposure and spend less time on your device, you're going to be living more. And ultimately, isn't that what we're shooting for? To live a healthy, happy life without an addiction to anything in particular.
Well, and you're going for an ideal that I think every person is going to be struggling with now, because again, if you put a child into a school, they're going to be expected to use the computer to do homework, to do research. It could even be a program that teaches the child to read rather than, to have a person sitting next to them going over words together. And then just for a job, in order to have a job, you need to have a device. So we have to really change our expectations of ourselves and we do need limits, and we're going to be starting in our homes with making limits.
So at school and at work, there may be circumstances in which we can't really alter that, but I feel like a lot of people are on their devices simply to be on social media.
I have a suggestion which comes from Tristan Harris, who was a designer at Google. And he says if you want to reduce your social media use, move your social media to the second or the third page of your device. So you don't have an immediate access to your social media. You have to go to the second page or the third page, and that will slow down your access to it, and see if that slows down your use of social media.
Absolutely. And I have another tip. On my phone, I've added a color filter so it makes my whole screen red. So, number one, that blocks the blue light, which can interfere with melatonin production and other things. And also, it just makes it less addictive because there aren't all the cute little colors kind of drawing my eye in. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, good.
Yeah, that is good. One more question I wanted to ask you is about passive screen time versus interactive screen time. I see, people using the devices to entertain their children. Is that okay?
Many of us were raised watching television. That's passive screen time. And when you interact with the screen, so you use the mouse, you click on things, and then that activates a link or some other kind of movement on the screen, that's interactive screen time. Okay, now Jerry Mander, who wrote 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television in 1978, had a wonderful description. If you can imagine watching a screen where there's a train coming at you, even when you're an adult, that is really scary. Your adrenaline's going to go up. You're going to be really agitated while this train is coming at you on the screen, and your brain has to tell you it's not real, but I'm feeling all this stuff, but my feelings are really strong, even though I know it's not real. Okay, dealing with that passive screen time when you've got a developing brain, that's really challenging. Now, put a mouse in that child's hand so that they can manipulate that train coming at them, and they can have it crash into a building still on a screen, or into another person on the screen. That's another layer. That's interactive screen time. And that's another layer of brain wiring that's going to agitate what's going on. We know that autism is basically overstimulation of neurons, and passive screen time and interactive screen time are overstimulating. The interactive screen time is much more hazardous than passive screen time.
That's the opposite of what I would have thought, because I would have thought, okay, interactive, they're in control. The adrenaline doesn't kick in because they know they can make the train do something else. And I often see children playing games on these devices. So I thought, well, and people often say, at least it's educational, right? But in this case, you're saying both are hazardous. Interesting.
I'm saying that the interactive screen time is much more hazardous. And Dr. Victoria Dunkley explains this very clearly in Reset Your Child's Brain. And she has the studies that demonstrate that. It's also important that the content you said, okay, the kids are at least watching educational videos. The content does not matter. It's the medium that is affecting us, not the content.
Well, this is fascinating, and we will definitely put links to the different books and resources you've mentioned in this conversation, Katie. I want to ask you as we wrap up to use technology in a healthier way. If you just had one tip or one step that you would recommend, what would you recommend that they do?
I'm going to vote that they find a friend in their neighborhood, a person they can talk to and make eye-to-eye contact with. And, you have a support group so that you're committed to finding ways together that will decrease your exposure. If you can find that, that's the best thing I think that you can do for yourself and your family, is to find other people who will support you and welcome your support in answering these questions.
I love that. A human connection in real life to help you manage a virtual connection or addiction. So thank you, Katie, for your time today. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Our guest today was Katie Singer. Check out her website, electronicsilencespring.com. And Katie is also kicking off a campaign to reduce our internet footprint. Learn more about that campaign at ourweb.tech/campaign. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And that's it. Thanks for listening, you guys, and see you next time.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.